Hey guys, Andy here with BentoByte.co. Today we're going to be reviewing InfiniTrap, Ohio Jack, and the Cup of Eternity. This is an indie puzzle platformer game sold on Steam for $5.99. There's 28 levels in the game, 20 base levels and 8 bonus levels currently, with a level editor. It is made by Shadebob Games, which is a one-man studio. He made this game with his son, and this is the first game that he has released. This is a fairly fun indie platformer with some puzzle elements in it. It's kind of a game where you're supposed to jump over some traps and duck over others, and it has its moments of great difficulty, and I think it's aimed towards a hardcore audience, but if you're not hardcore, you could also make your way through it, and I think it's pretty good in that respect. This game has a lot of pros and cons, so I'm going to list them here and there. So the first pros I have with the game is that it's not a graphically intensive game at all. If you're running this on a laptop or anything like that, it's really good. The options are fairly basic with a full screen on or off, no real resolution options, but I've not seen anything on the Steam forums about people not being able to get their game to work on whatever system they're running. So the options are fairly basic, but the game doesn't really need a whole lot of options here. For the first game from this developer, I think it's actually really good. This game does advertise full Gamepad support. I do not personally have one, so I cannot attest to whether or not it works, but I have not seen anybody complain about whether or not their gamepad works. This is a fairly cheap game being sold for $5.99. You do only get 28 levels with it, but you do get a level editor with it, and I believe if some maps were made by the community, it would work out really well as kind of a Spelunky-esque puzzler. Now, this is a fairly simple game, and the point of it is kind of to die. There's a death counter in the upper right-hand corner that you can see, also with a timer on the levels. If the timer runs out, the level will slowly devolve into spikes and you will fall through the floor. But every time you die, you just respawn on the same level over and over again. And I think it's actually fairly fun to die, even though there's a lack of variety in deaths. It can get a bit frustrating if you're dying to the same thing over and over again. There's only a small assortment of traps. You have boulders, which will crush you, darts, which you have to duck under, saws, which you have to jump over, flame throwers, flame balls, and like vertical flame balls that shoot out of lava, then there's zombies, there's spiked floors and spike pits, and then there's also acid, which has a deadly little surprise in it. So for a game as small as this, the variety is actually huge. But if you find yourself dying to the same thing over and over again, it can get very, very frustrating. But, coming with the deaths, the creator actually put in these witty little quotes that the main character will say after you die. And I think that's actually pretty funny. There's not that many of them, but sometimes it'll work out in your favor. It'll also give you hints on how to avoid dying in that way again. The game also has a couple of floor statuses. There are ice floors, which are basically a must-have for any kind of platformer like this, and I think it works well, except for the fact that you can kind of glitch it to where if you're up against a wall, if you move in the right way, you can get yourself to stop basically on a dime, and I think there's a little bit of problem there. There's also spider webs, which make you move much slower on them, and keep you from being able to jump. So if you're not able to jump, you get killed rather easily in this game, and I think it's an interesting way to go about it and add a lot more difficulty to some of the levels. The lighting in this game is fantastic. If you haven't been looking at the footage in the background, I ask you to do so, because just look at the lighting, the shadows, and everything else. It just works out really well with all of the light sources and everything else, so good job there. There's signs of really good difficulty in this game. It looks like it can be a hardcore game through and through, except for the base game. The base game seems to shows glimmers of hope. Glimmers of hope with how difficult it can get, but then the next level throws you right back to, well, just jump over this pit and duck under this fireball and you're good to go. Before we get into the cons of this game, Mr. Gibson, which is the Steam name of the developer, said on December 25th that he will be fixing some of the issues in the existing version of the game. The version of the game that we obtained to review is version 0.99, which is the current release version on Steam for December 27th. So, with that being said, let's get into the cons of the game. The level editor for the game is fairly unclear until you watch the video that Mr. Gibson made of putting a small level together. If you are aware of basic coding and everything else, it should be fantastic. You should be able to do some pretty crazy stuff with this level editor, and I would look forward to seeing what people come up with. However, if you think that you just played the game through and you want to get more content out of it, if you want to make your own levels and stuff, it's gotta kind of be hard for you if you don't know basic coding until you watch his video. So I suggest if you're looking to get into the level editor and you don't know a whole lot about coding or creating game levels, go ahead and go watch that. The next con that I have with this game is this very short game. It's a very small game with the 28 levels, excluding the game crashes and glitches that I'll get into. The entire game probably took me about an hour to beat, and that's the first time through. After you know basically what you're doing, it gets really fast to beat after that. I have beaten the game 3 or 4 times, bonus levels and all, and it's taken me about 2 hours. The storyline of the game is very kind of basic. You'll get a laugh out of it in the first opening cutscene and dialogue and everything else, but beyond that, the story is very simple. Now, right now, there are really only 16 levels in the base level set, because the first level is tutorial and the last level is kind of a pick and choose, and there's not a whole lot of replayability to the game after you have beaten it, unless you want to see what other options, in which case if you go to continue you can actually just select the level from there. Now, 5 of the bonus levels currently in this version 0.99 are broken, and by broken I mean when you obtain the trophy at the end of the level, your character will kind of just freeze and it won't actually end the level. Now, the levels that suffer from that are banana jumps, forward, and greedy. Now, falling floors, once you actually get towards the end of the level, it just crashes on you. And when I say this game crashes, it just kills the game without any warning. Brain Dead Crypt is the same. After you pick up the trophy and press continue, it will just crash the game. Now, this game, the creator, Mr. Gibson, said that he thinks of this as a hardcore game, but it is marketed as a casual game. I think there's a lot of confusion there because he's trying to strike a balance. He did make this game with his son, and he's trying to make a game that basically everyone can enjoy. There's even a blood and gore on and off option. But it seems some levels of it are casual and some levels of it are hardcore, and there's not really a middle ground. So I think if you're going to go for the hardcore demographic, you should just go all the way and make some levels that are near impossible. But that does bring up some of the issues with the platforming in the game. The platforming is kind of fast and loose. You've got some platforms, it's basically a square by square game, and some of the squares between, say, a pit and a landing platform, the edge isn't quite clearly defined, it seems, in the coding or something like that, because your character, sometimes when you're on the edge, you're not quite on the edge, so it'll just throw you off into a pit of spikes or into lava or something like that. And for a game that has to be as precise as this one, I have a feeling there's going to be some really angry deaths caused because of that. The game has a small amount of variety, and it hits every kind of action adventure game trope in one way or another. Like, it has the pressure pads, and it's kind of like an Indiana Jones-esque experience. So there's platforms that'll cause like boulders and stuff to happen, and they'll cause walls to disappear and stuff like that, but it really only hits all of these in one way. So that's all of the pros and cons that I have come up with for InfiniTrap, Ohio Jack, and the Cup of Eternity. All in all, to the developer, I think it was a great effort, and once these issues get resolved in version 0.99, then it will be a fantastic game once everything is solved. But, seeing as how we have to rate it as the game currently is, right now, I give the game a rating of 4 out of 10. Good effort. It's not necessarily bad, but it's below average. With the crashes and everything else, it can get fairly frustrating, and once these get resolved and stuff, I would easily put it at a 6 out of 10, a nice above average little platformer, especially once a community gets behind it and starts making some games. So that would be the BentoByte numbers for that. If you would like to pick up this game, I suggest really picking it up on a sale or something. It is a fun experience, and if you think it's worth the time and the money, go for it. Especially if you're not that good at platformers, I have a feeling this is a good way to kind of get you into the genre. This has been Andy from BentoByte, signing off.